Modern India, Part 4. Wars under Warren Hastings. The East India Company had by 1772 become an important Indian power, and its directors in England and its officials in India set out to consolidate their control over Bengal before beginning a new round of conquests. However, their habit of interfering in the internal affairs of the Indian states and their lust for territory and money soon involved them in a series of wars. In 1766, they joined the Nizam of Hyderabad in attacking Hyder Ali of Mysore. But Hyder Ali forced the Madras Council to sign a peace treaty on his terms. Then in 1775, the English clashed with Marathas. An intense struggle for power was taking place at that time among the Marathas between the supporters of the infant Peshwa Madhav Rao, led by Nana Fadnis, and Raghunath Rao. The British officials in Bombay decided to intervene on behalf of Raghunath Rao. They hoped thus to repeat the exploits of their countrymen in Madras and Bengal to reap the consequent monetary advantages. This involved them in a long war with the Marathas which lasted from 1775 to 1782. This was a dark hour indeed for British power in India. All the Maratha chiefs were united behind the Peshwa and his chief minister Nana Fadnis. The southern India powers had long been resenting the presence of the British among them. Hyder Ali and the Nizam chose the moment to declare war against the company. Thus, the British were faced with the powerful combination of the Marathas, Mysore, and Hyderabad. Moreover, abroad they were waging a losing war in the colonies in America, where the people had rebelled in 1776. They had also to counter the determined design of the French to exploit the difficulties of their old rival. The British in India were, however, led at this time by the energetic and experienced Governor General Warren Hastings. He acted with firm resolve and determination. Neither side won victory, and the war came to a standstill. Peace was concluded in 1782 by the Treaty of Salbai, by which the status quo was maintained. It saved the British from the combined opposition of the Indian powers. This war, known in history as the First Anglo-Maratha War, did not end in victory for either side. But it did give the British 20 years of peace with the Marathas, the strongest Indian power of the day. The British utilized this period to consolidate their rule over Bengal Presidency, while the Maratha chiefs frittered away their energy in bitter mutual squabbles. Moreover, the Treaty of Salbai enabled the British to exert pressure on Mysore, as the Marathas promised to help them in recovering their territories from Hyder Ali once the British had succeeded on dividing the Indian powers. In the meanwhile, war with Hyder Ali had again started in 1780. Repeating his earlier exploits, Hyder Ali inflicted one defeat after another on the British armies in the Carnatic and forced them to surrender in large numbers. He soon occupied almost the whole of Carnatic. But once again, British arms and diplomacy saved the day. Warren Hastings bribed Nizam with the cession of Guntur district and gained his withdrawal from the anti-British alliance. During 1781 to 82, he made peace with the Marathas and thus freed a large part of his army for use against Mysore. In July 1781, the British army under Ercourt defeated Hyder Ali at Porto Novo and saved Madras. After Hyder Ali's death in December 1782, the war was carried on by his son Tipu Sultan. Since neither side was capable of overpowering the other, peace was signed by them on March 1784, and both sides restored all conquests. Thus, though the British had been shown to be too weak to defeat either the Marathas or Mysore, they had certainly proved their ability to hold their own in India. The third British encounter with Mysore was more fruitful from the British point of view. The peace of 1784 had not removed the grounds of struggle between Tipu and the British. They looked upon him as their most formidable rival in the south, and as the chief obstacle standing between them and the complete domination over the South India. Tipu on his part thoroughly disliked the English, saw them as chief danger to his own independence, and nursed the ambition to expel them from India. War between the two began again in 1789 and ended in Tipu's defeat in 1792. By the Treaty of Seringapatam, Tipu ceded half of his territories to the English and their allies, and paid 330 lakhs of rupees as indemnity. Expansion under Lord Wellesley, 1798 to 1805. The next large-scale expansion of British rule in India occurred during the Governor-Generalship of Lord Wellesley, who came to India in 1798, and at the time when the British were locked in a life-death struggle with France all over the world. Till then, the British had followed the policy of consolidating their gains and resources in India and making territorial gains only when this could dance safely, without antagonizing the major Indian powers. Lord Wellesley decided that the time was ripe for bringing as many Indian states as possible under British control. By 1797, two strongest Indian powers, Mysore and the Marathas, had declined in power. Political conditions in India were propitious for a policy of expansion. Aggression was easy as well as profitable. To achieve all his political aims, Wellesley relied on three methods: the system of subsidiary alliances, outright war, and the assumption of territories of the previously subordinated rulers. While the practices of helping an Indian ruler with a paid British force was quite old, it was given definite shape by Wellesley, who used it to subordinate the Indian states to be paramount authority of the company. Under his subsidiary alliance system, the ruler of the ailing Indian state was compelled to accept the permanent stationing of British force within his territory and to pay a subsidy for its maintenance. All this was done allegedly for his protection, but was in fact a form of thought which the Indian ruler paid tribute to the company, sometimes as ruler ceded part of his territory instead of paying annual subsidy. The subsidiary treaty usually also provided that the Indian ruler would agree to the posting at his court of a British resident, that he would not employ any European in his service without the approval of the British, and that he would not negotiate with any other Indian ruler without consulting the Governor General. In return, the British undertook to defend the ruler from his enemies. They also promised non-interference in the internal affairs of the allied state, but this was a promise they seldom kept. In reality, by signing a subsidiary alliance, an Indian state virtually signed away its independence. It lost the right of self-defense, of maintaining diplomatic relationships, of employing foreign experts, and of settling its dispute with its neighbors. In fact, the Indian ruler lost all vestiges of sovereignty in external matters and became increasingly subservient to the British resident, who interfered in the day-to-day administration of the state. In addition, the system tended to bring about the internal decay of the protected state. The cost of the subsidiary force provided by the British was very high, and in fact much beyond the paying capacity of the state. The payment of the arbitrarily fixed and artificially bloated subsidy invariably undisputed the economy of the state and impoverished its people. The system of subsidiary alliances also led to the disbandment of armies of the protected states. Lakhs of soldiers and officers were deprived of their livelihood, spreading misery and degradation in the country. Moreover, the rulers of the protected states tended to neglect the interests of their people and to oppress them as they no longer feared them. They had no incentive to be good rulers, as they were fully protected by the British from domestic and foreign enemies. The subsidiary alliance system was, on the other hand, extremely advantageous to the British. They could now maintain a large army at the cost of Indian states. This enabled them to fight wars away from their own territories. Since any war would occur in the territories of either the British ally or of the British enemy, they controlled the defense and foreign relations of the protected ally and had a powerful force stationed at the very heart of its lands, and could therefore at any time of their choosing overthrow him and annex his territories by declaring him to be inefficient. As far as the British were concerned, the system of subsidiary alliances was, in words of a British writer, a system of fattening allies, as we fatten oxen till they are worthy of being devoured. Lord Wellesley signed his subsidiary treaties with the Nizam of Hyderabad in 1798 and 1800. In lieu of cash payment for the subsidiary forces, the Nizam ceded part of his territories to the company. The Nawab of Awadh was forced to sign a subsidiary treaty in 1801. In return for a larger subsidiary force, the Nawab was made to surrender to his British nearly half of his kingdom, consisting of Rohilkhand and the territory lying between the Ganga and Jamuna. His own army was virtually disbanded, and the British had the right to station their troops in any part of the state. Wellesley dealt with Mysore, Carnatic, Tanjore, and Surat even more sternly. Tipu of Mysore would, of course, never agree to a subsidiary treaty. On the contrary, he had never reconciled himself to the loss of half of his territory in 1792. He worked incessantly to strengthen his forces for the inevitable struggle with the British. He entered into negotiations for alliance with the revolutionary France. He sent missions to Afghanistan, Arabia, and Turkey to forge an anti-British alliance. The British army attacked and defeated Tipu in a brief but fierce war in 1799 before French help could reach him. Tipu still refused to beg for peace on humiliating terms. He proudly declared that it was better to die like a soldier than to live a miserable dependent on the infidels in the list of their pensioned Rajas and Nawabs. He met a hero's end on 4th May 1799 while defending his capital, Seringapatnam. His army remained loyal to him and to the very end. Nearly half of Tipu's dominions were divided between the British and their ally, the Nizam. The reduced kingdom of Mysore was restored to its descendants of the original Rajas from whom Hyder Ali had seized power. A special treaty of subsidiary alliance was imposed on the new Rajas, by which the Governor General was authorized to take over the administration of the state in case of necessity. Mysore was in fact made a complete dependency of the company. In 1801, Lord Wellesley forced a new treaty upon the puppet Nawab of Carnatic, compelling him to cede his kingdom to the company in return for pension. The Madras Presidency, as it existed till 1947, was now created. By attaching the Carnatic to territories seized from Mysore, including the Malabar. Similarly, the territories of the rulers of Tanjore and Surat were taken over and their rulers pensioned off. The Marathas were the only major Indian power left outside the sphere of British control. Wellesley now turned his attention towards them and began aggressive interference in their internal affairs. The Maratha Empire at this time consisted of a confederacy of 5 big chiefs, namely the Peshwa at Pune, the Gaikwad at Baroda, the Scindia at Gwalior, and the Holkar at Indore, and the Bhonsle at Nagpur. The Peshwas became the nominal head of the confederacy, but all of them were engaged in bitter fratricidal strife, blind to the real danger from the rapidly advancing foreigner. Wellesley had repeatedly offered a subsidiary alliance to the Peshwa and Scindia, but the far-sighted Nana Fadnis had refused to fall into the trap. However, when on 25th October 1802, the day of great festival of Diwali, Holkar defeated the combined enemies of the Peshwa and Scindias. The cowardly Peshwa Bajirao II rushed into the arms of the English on the fateful last day of 1802, signed the subsidiary treaty at Bessin. The victory had been a little too easy, and Wellesley was wrong in one respect. The proud Maratha chiefs would not surrender their great tradition of independence without a struggle. But even in this moment of their peril, they would not unite against their common enemy. While Scindia and Bhonsle fought the British, Holkar stood up on the sidelines and Gaikwad gave help to the British. When Holkar took up arms, Bhonsle and Scindia nursed their wounds. In the south, the British armies led by Arthur Wellesley defeated the combined armies of Scindia and Bhonsle at Asai in September 1803 and at Aragaon in November. In the north, Lord Lake routed Scindia's army at Laswari on the 1st of November and occupied Aligarh, Delhi and Agra. Once again, the blind Emperor of India became a pensioner of the company. The Marathas allies had to sue for peace. Both Scindia and Bhonsle became subsidiary alliance of the company. subsidiary allies of the company. They ceded part of their own territories in the British, admitted British residents to their court, and promised not to employ the Europeans without the British approval. The British granted complete control over the Odisha coast and the territories between the Ganga and the Yamuna. The Peshwa became a disgruntled puppet in their hands. Wellesley now turned his attention towards Holkar, but Yashwant Rao Holkar proved more than a match for the British and fought British armies to a standstill. Holkar's ally, the Raja of Bharatpur, inflicted heavy losses on Lake, who unsuccessfully attempted to storm his fort. Moreover, overcoming his age-old antagonism to the Holkar family, Scindia began to think of joining hands with Holkar. On the other hand, the shareholders of the East India Company discovered that the policy of expansion through war was proving costly and was reducing their profits. The company's debt had increased from 17 million in 1791 to 31 million in 1806. Moreover, Britain's finances were getting exhausted at the time when Napoleon was once again becoming a major threat in Europe. British statesmen and the directors of the company felt that time had come to check further expansion and put an end of this ruinous expenditure and the digest of consolidate British recent gains in India. Wellesley was therefore recalled from India, and the company made peace with Holkar in January 1806 by the Treaty of Ryghat, giving back to the Holkar the greater part of his territories. Wellesley's expansionist policy had been checked near the end. All the same, it had resulted in the East India Company becoming a paramount power in India. A younger officer in company's judicial services, Henry Robert Claw, wrote in 1805, "An Englishman in India is proud and tenacious. He feels himself a conqueror amongst a vanquished people and looks down with some degrees of superiority on all below him."